Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres. So today, instead of the mystery meat sandwich, I get to introduce to you something new and exciting. It's like all the rage. Like, remember in Zoolander, so hot right now, Hansel, so hot right now. It's just pretty much the same. It's just like that, okay? So today I have with me two lovely ladies, entrepreneurs. They are czars of sobriety. They are Alysse Bryson, the CEO and founder of the Sober Curator, and also, P.S., fellow 80s superfan, and Carolyn Bunn, marketing expert, and the business manager of yours truly, which is a huge job. Not because my business is big, but because my brain isn't very big. So I'm excited to introduce the Boozeless Bookclub to you. Yay! And I also want to give a special shout out to our fourth host, Sarah Alamo, and she is a career happiness coach. And she just mere days ago had a baby. Welcome to the world, baby Jack. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with Carolyn. She's going to give us a brief synopsis of the book. This is our first time, and we read Mean Baby by Selma Blair.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'm so excited for this. So I thought we could start with a little synopsis of what the book is about before we start talking about it. So the synopsis of the book that I pulled up, Selma Blair has played many roles. She's played preppy ice queen in Legally Blonde, Firestarter in Hellboy, muse to Karl Lagerfeld, face of Chanel, advocate for multiple sclerosis community. But before all of that, Selma was best known for one thing, a mean baby. The first story Selma ever heard about herself is that she was mean. With her mouth pulled in a perpetual snarl and her head so furry it had to be rubbed to make way for her forehead, Selma spent years living up to her terrible reputation, biting her sisters, lying spontaneously, getting drunk from Passover wine at the age of 7, and behaving dramatically so she would be the center of attention. Although Selma went on to become a celebrated Hollywood actress and model, she could never quite shake the periods of darkness that overtook her. The certainty that there was a great mystery at the heart of her life. She often felt like her arms might be on fire, a sensation not unlike electric shocks, and she secretly drank to escape. Over the course of this beautiful and at times shocking memoir, Selma lays bare her addiction to alcohol, her devotion to her brilliant and complicated mother, and the moments she flirted with death. So it goes on and on, but that kind of gives you a synopsis of what the book is about that we'll talk about. So there's many different pieces here, and the main reason we chose to talk about this book today was her addiction to alcohol, and kind of talking through that and how that played in her a diagnosis with multiple sclerosis as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Okay, so this is off the cuff. I gave these ladies a few questions to kind of get the ball rolling, but I didn't give them this one.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Watch out, because I didn't want you to overthink it. What I am wondering before we start unpacking this, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best book you ever read in your entire life, and now it's your Bible, to number 1 being that completely sucked balls. What number are you with this book?
Oh, that's a really good question. Like, are we saying all books or memoirs?
We're just saying this particular book.
This particular book. Okay. I loved this book, like, so much. And the week that I listened to it on Audible was a particularly hard week for me. And I was in a dark place. And quite honestly, she, like, breathed life back into me listening to this book. But I don't know that it was a 10. Because that's a pretty big number to give. So I'm going to go with 8.5.
Love it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Alysse gives it an 8.5. Carolyn?
So for myself, and I do think it kind of depends on when you listen to different things or read different books.
Yeah.
I was kind of, I think the first part for me was really hard to listen to because it was very emotionally dark. And so for myself, maybe it just wasn't the right time for me to listen to, but I would say it was probably like a 5 on my scale. It just wasn't what maybe I needed to hear at the time. But I do think there were some good pieces to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
What about you, Amy?
So I'm going to pick a 5 as well. And I will tell you why. The very first section of the book where she's talking about her childhood, I struggled with a lot. And at one point, I picked up the phone and I called Alysse and I was like, you have to tell me this is going to get better. I just don't know that I can make it through this book. And I just felt like it was heavy. It was heavy, heavy, heavy. And I totally agree with what you said. I am the same way. Both of you said this. Where I am in life kind of sort of determines how I hear what I'm reading and how I then, how it hits me, how it washes over me. And so I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I was somewhere in the middle when all was said and done. But once I got past that first part, I really found it very entertaining. And I thought she was a really good storyteller and I enjoyed that part. So here's my first kind of question to kind of open this up a little bit. Who did you identify with most in the book and why?
Well, I think for myself, probably, I think there were parts of Selma that I could identify with. And I appreciated what she said about, it was really interesting hearing her talk about her time in Hollywood and how she felt, even though she was in a lot of these big movies and big shows, her time along, like Reese Witherspoon and feeling like, that imposter syndrome that so many of us feel, right? Where we still feel like, what am I doing here?
I agree with that. I think there were lots of pieces of her story that I identified with. I was mildly enamored with her. I love the fact that we know that there's going to be Hollywood interwoven in throughout the story, given the fact that she's an actress. And, I think of the movies that I loved her in, like Cruel Intentions and The Sweetest Thing. Like, I loved her in those movies. I've seen those movies multiple times. I also, prior to reading this book, watched the documentary about her MS probably 6 months ago. And I really felt like I got to know her on a deeper, more personal level. And then the fact that I was reading this via Audible, meaning I was listening to it, I loved that it was in her voice and that she, her storytelling ability is just great. And probably because she was telling her own personal story. But I remember when you called me and were like, I don't know if I can get through this. This beginning is really throwing me off. And I was like, did I miss the beginning? Did it not register with me? But I think that I didn't have the same experience you both had with having a tough time through the beginning, in part that maybe, and let's get into this, but maybe it's because I had a different relationship with my mom than what you had with your moms. But I also think because I was in a very dark place when I was listening to it, like I was already so dark myself that her darkness, I just felt like camaraderie, quite honestly, and like less alone in my aloneness and darkness. And then just as another Easter egg throughout the whole book, I love all of her nods to fashion, and that she would talk about her outfits and like her very first Burberry coat at age 10.
Yeah.
And, and I'm a very visual person. So I really loved how that was intertwined throughout the whole book.
Yeah, 100%. And I love too the Hollywood stuff. I loved that. And I loved the way she was so gracious to her exes. I thought that was very kind. And all of the celebrities that she mentioned, she wasn't throwing mud at anybody. And I thought that was really neat that she could find something positive that she left us with when she mentioned those people. But yeah, let's segue into the whole mother-daughter relationship, because one of my questions I actually wrote down was, what did you find challenging about the book and why? And, I think when she was describing how perfect her mom was, and her mom was totally just put together all the time, didn't want to be seen unless she was in her full regalia, and actually fired a housekeeper once for walking in to her bedroom before she was dressed and everything. I thought that was such a fascinating picture of just how we look up to our parents when we're that age, and we just want to be them and everything that they emulate, at least for me. I remember thinking my parents knew everything. They knew everything. Like, my parents taught me about the world and its truths. And as I aged, finding out that that wasn't necessarily true, that my parents did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. That was kind of jarring for me, kind of like, oh, wait a minute. So they're not the end all be all of everything. And I thought it was interesting watching the way that Selma talked about her mom and the different things that her mom did that really hurt her, really hurt Selma's feelings, and really hurt. It seemed like a lot of miscommunications, a lot of missed expectations, a lot of perceptions. And also, I remember as a child not understanding the pressures of being an adult. And that's just is what it is. But having that whole piece of your life that as an adult is stressful. The mom had a lot of jobs, and Selma had like a why aren't you spending more time with us kind of a mentality. I could totally see that playing out because, yeah, I did the same thing. I would always wonder. I remember thinking one time, so does my dad ever get like a summer break? What's going on here? And just not understanding from a child's point of view.
I did like how she would change her voice when she would act like her mom was talking to her, because she definitely had a very distinct way that she would speak if she was pretending to be her mom talking to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed that part. I don't know why it didn't resonate with me that there was as much maybe strife between her and her mom as that you both picked up on. I don't know why that's not a part of the story that I dug into.
Well, I also watched the documentary, but I watched it after I read the book. And so I remember when I read the book, I had feelings of being a little bit mad at Selma. A little bit like, my gosh, you're so hard on your frickin' mom in this book. And like, as a parent myself, I think it felt pressurized. It felt very, gosh, well, is this hitting a nerve in me? That I am that parent who is, I thought it sounded like she was kind of neglectful at different parts and wasn't able to meet her child's needs emotionally. And, and it just, I felt like, geez, am I that? I kind of made it about me, and it kind of became this interior examination of myself where I thought, geez, what if I'm a suck-ass parent and I grow up and my kids resent me? And whatever. They say something about me like that in the memoir. And I kind of was like, I felt in a way that I was having her mom's back a little bit more than hers. And of course, my kids will resent me and I'll just pay for their counseling. I've said that many times. But I wrote down this quote that she said in the documentary afterwards. So Selma's mom had died by this point. And Selma said, I blamed my mother for me not having the right tools. And I feel so heavy for that now. And I thought that was very kind and generous. And I thought it was a good self-reflection.
Yeah, and I think in that documentary, and even in parts of the book towards the end, after Selma has her own child.
Yeah.
You can see that she mothers very differently than how she was parented and how she was mothered.
Right.
It's very different. So she does, and that's got to be intentional, that she's working so hard to be different than what she experienced herself. Doesn't mean it will be without mistake. That makes sense.
The whole thing about her mom being very, this is how we look, this is what we wear, and just being very kind of obsessed with, how she would leave the house. And that would be hard.
Was your mom that way?
As a kid? No.
My mom wasn't that way either.
No, she wasn't. No, my mom, the only thing we ever got in a tiff over outfit-wise was these yellow boots that I had in kindergarten. And she did warn me, do not wear those without socks because they were super fuzzy inside. Guess what I did? Wore them without socks. 2 days later, they had to go in the trash because we couldn't even bring them inside. They stunk so bad.
Oh.
Yeah. That, and then I talk about this in my book, so I won't mention it a big deal here, but I wanted to wear a name tag in one of my class photos. Yeah, my mom and I kind of just went Hulk Hogan, and that was just it. We just could not agree on that, so.
So not quite the same, yeah.
Not quite the same.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I kind of wonder, and I would be interested to hear other people's perspectives on it, but if that was a thing of her mother's generation as well.
Yeah.
Where you're very much like put together, the perfect housewife type of role, and you expect the same of your children. Yeah. And so that would be interesting to hear other people's perspectives on. But I think also, with her mother, what you were saying, it would have been interesting, and I kind of reflecting on it, she did publish the book after her mother had passed away. So I'm wondering if that, on her part, was kind of a way to heal a little bit and kind of get her thoughts out there on it. But it would have been interesting to hear her mother's side, because I think there's two different sides, right? And how a child perceives it is so different from how a parent would perceive the same thing.
Did anything come up for either of you with her father and the fact that he was largely absent early?
Yeah, so that's such a good question, because interestingly, I was paying no attention to that. I just didn't even clue in much on that, other than, he wasn't around, until she brought him up like later.
Yeah, I kind of, because he was absent, I don't really think it resonated with me that much, other than the fact that she mentioned it later after he passed away. He did not get a chance to meet her son.
The whole idea of how later, there was a part where, I found this troubling, I guess is what I'm going to say, because it was a reflection. I kept thinking about my own parenting and how I am with my kids. And I had a lot of attachment stuff playing out in my head. So the part where she was lying on the bed with her mom and she was snuggled up with her mom, and this is back to the childhood again. And all she wanted to do was say, Mom, I feel safe here with you. I never want to leave your side. I am happiest here. And then her mom had to get up and go to work, or there was something like that. And it was like that heartbreaking, she shoot, I knew this wouldn't last kind of feeling, I knew at some point she was going to leave me kind of, I mean, it was just this very heartfelt, and in my body, I could feel that. And I thought, gosh, do my kids feel that? And it just made me, I think, feel guilty and, start questioning everything I am about, my own motherhood, my own, how I'm a mother to my kids. Womp womp. Yeah. Okay, but I do have to know, because this is such a fun question. Okay, if there was a movie version of Mean Baby, who would you cast as Selma and why? And it can't be her, okay? And then I'm going to ask you about her mom, but I thought we'd do one at a time.
I know who I would cast for her mom.
Me too. Should we start with the mom?
Yeah.
Do it.
Nicole Kidman.
Oh.
Because she nobody does prim and proper.
Yes.
And put together better than Nicole Kidman.
Right.
And I don't know what Selma's mother looks like, so I don't even know if that would be an accurate depiction or not. But that's who comes up for me is, a little frigid, prim and proper, can be funny, but is very polished and just doesn't look like she ever makes a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking Anne Bancroft, specifically in Great Expectations. I was thinking her, or the second runner-up, not too far off, would be the mom in Titanic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember her?
I get that. Yeah, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the first person that came to mind was Alison Janney and her role in I, Tonya, but a more polished version of her because she was clearly not as polished sounding in that movie. But just the way that she talked to her daughter in terms of her daughter could never quite meet her expectations. So you could make her a little more polished version.
So if you're listening, we are talking about, if you've seen I, Tonya, we're talking about Tonya Harding's mom in that movie. Yeah.
As far as who would play Selma, I don't know why, but Ariana Grande is coming to mind because of maybe the petiteness of her stature.
Yeah.
Because Selma's a very petite woman.
Yeah.
Like she's very, very small, but I mean, she's just small. She just seems like you could put her in your pocket.
Yep.
I feel like, I don't know why I think her, but maybe.
Like a little action figure, right? Like the Selma action figure.
You're going to think this is strange, but the first person that I could think of was, because of her uniqueness, was Billie Eilish.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just
I see that.
She's a little unique. I don't even know if she is an actress of any type, but she has great music, but she's just, because she's unique, and so is Selma in terms of their personality. So that's the person I thought of.
That's good.
I love it.
I can see that.
I kind of went another direction. I was thinking more like Angelina Jolie and Girl Interrupted, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Or Winona Ryder. I don't know, just kind of that I'm a little offbeat in kind of a sexy, mysterious way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or, B. Arthur. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Okay. So what kind of emotions and feelings did the book, we've kind of touched on this, but what did it bring up for you? What came up from the inner depths of your soul?
I think for me, interestingly, it wasn't as much about, I thought this would resonate with me because we're all sober people here, the sobriety piece of it. But I think the piece that really resonated with me was how she found the self-love later in her life.
Yes.
And she said something that really stood out to me was, you just need one person to root for you. I think that was the quote, something like that in there. You just really just need one person out there. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to have the whole world love you, but having somebody in your corner that really roots for you. And I think also just realizing that she always kind of knew it didn't matter whether she was on the cover of Vogue or what she was doing. Like, her mother would always have a critique. And so just finding other places to get that self-satisfaction in life outside of your parents, because we grow up kind of always trying to please our parents and then realizing later, like, we don't have to please everybody. And our parents can be those people that, maybe we don't always agree with them either later in life. So I thought that was interesting. That was a piece I took out of it.
So good.
I liked when she talked about her first experiences in trying to get sober, and that she went to AA, she went to 12-step, and that it worked for her. And until it didn't, in the fact that because she was a celebrity, her autonomy and, being treated like everybody else in the church basement, it started to change. And I've personally witnessed that. I myself am not famous, except in my own head. But I know famous to you. Yes, you're my number one fan. But I have friends that are famous and in recovery, and I've seen firsthand how they do get treated differently, and it's really unfortunate. And because everybody needs what they need for a life in recovery. So I liked that she talked positive about 12-step, because I don't know, sometimes I feel like 12-step gets a lot of negative beats, especially in this day and age, because it's the old sobriety. It's not the new sobriety. And so I appreciated that she talked about that, and that her battles with addiction, they ebbed and flowed. They were problematic and then not so problematic, and then problematic, then not so problematic. Like that's really what it was like. I mean, it was for me. Yep. I mean, I didn't get sober until I was 30, but my 20s was largely drinking and using, but sometimes I was thriving and sometimes I was not. So I enjoyed that piece of it, but I originally read this book because of the fact I knew that she's a person in recovery, but there was so much more to her talking about her mental illness and health challenges, that as a person who also struggles with both of those things, I really, I just found her story really endearing, because she's truly a survivor. She really has had to fight for where she's at. That doesn't just happen.
I loved what you said about her ping-ponging back and forth in the addiction. And I, too, before I got sober, would have those nights where, I just never knew what was going to happen, because I'd go drinking, and some nights I would remember everything, and I felt pretty in control, and I had a pretty good time. And then you could take almost the exact same circumstances the next night, and I would just get totally blasted and obliterated, and would wake up and just go, what happened, and be in my clothes, and just that uncertainty that drinking brings, and just that whole spiral of addiction, and stopping for a while, but then something happens, and feeling like, I would want to drink to change the way I felt, and I could hammer together a good 2 weeks of sobriety at a time, like the best of them. Yeah. But not always. I finally stopped, for me personally, saying that I was going to slow down or going to quit, because I didn't want to fail. And so finally I just kind of said, forget it. I'm just going to drink every day, because I don't want to also fail, and that would feel terrible. So, just listening to some of her stories about that was, that was rough in a good way, like I identified. What did you appreciate or not appreciate about the book, and why?
I appreciated the span of time that the story arc took us through.
Yeah.
Like, in a pretty succinct way. Like, it went from the beginning to the end, and there were, some parts that kind of bounced around.
Yeah.
But you got a really good idea of her life. I mean, she did grow up with privilege, as horseback riding, for example, as a hobby is not inexpensive. So that just the fact that she was so into that shows that, she grew up with privilege and then obviously moving into Hollywood had quite a bit of privilege. But what I respect about her is she was of a time before social media, right? So she was before influencers and yeah, she was never, I don't know that she ever won any awards for being an actress. But the fact that she was modeling so much, for someone who doesn't fit the stereotypical modeling 6 foot tall, 100-pound prototype, at least of the 90s prototype. Like, I think that's, but she was really appreciated for her distinct look, which is what the book is called, Mean Baby. I mean, you immediately think of this little face that's just like shriveled up and just kind of like has an attitude, right? With the pile of hair on top. And like, that's still how she looks. So I really appreciated like listening to her journey. And that, she never had to be number one in her craft, whether it was modeling or acting. She just did what she did.
Yep.
Yeah. And she was a hard worker.
Yeah.
She was a really hard worker. Things didn't come necessarily easy to her.
Yeah. Carolyn, I'm going to ask you first. I'm sorry. What did you appreciate?
So I appreciated, I would say, one of the things that I guess I didn't know as much about MS before I read this book. And so hearing her insights about it, pre-diagnosis, and how a lot of the alcoholism was kind of covering up some of the MS symptoms and ways to see what MS symptoms are. My only experience with MS before was that I had a Sunday school teacher when I was a kid who had it, and she was in a wheelchair, and that's pretty much all that I knew. I didn't really understand the different variances of it and when it kind of comes in and out. So I appreciated learning more about that in addition to just kind of learning more about her. I think if I didn't appreciate something, I think maybe as an audiobook, I had a hard time, and maybe it would have been easier if I read it succinctly, but I think I had a hard time keeping up with where she was because she talked about her son early on as he was older, and then talked about her son being born later in the book, and so some of the chronological order got a little confusing for me when I was listening to it. But I wouldn't say that like ruined the book or anything for me. Yeah.
I do want to touch on her struggles with love, and struggles with, she had a lot of romance in her life. She was never really fulfilled in those relationships. I identified with that as well. So I appreciated that she shared that piece of her journey. The other thing I just want to say that I really appreciated that I didn't know about her prior to reading the book, I didn't know she was secretly besties with Carrie Fisher.
I know.
And as a Star Wars fan, like I was just blown away, like to the point that like one of her weddings was in her backyard, and that, Carrie Fisher, being the, eccentric woman that she was, like completely forgot that her wedding was that day and showed up and was like, oh, that's right. And like, and I don't want to ruin what happens after Carrie passes and the experience that Selma has with an object that ties in with Carrie Fisher. But because I love Carrie Fisher and I've seen her live on stage and I've read her books, and because of her open struggles with addiction, I wish I knew more about that friendship. I wish there had been more of it in the book because I just wanted to know more.
I love that. And the other part that you mentioned a second ago, Alysse, about the medical issues and specifically the diagnosis chapter, I thought was really moving. I really identified with that, with my own medical stuff, and felt like she had actually a quote. She said, the future you imagine for yourself begins to morph before your very eyes. Your plans, even the ones you didn't realize you had, start to look radically different. In a moment, your life divides itself into the before and after. You realize this body you've been inhabiting for so many years, this bizarre collection of cells, has turned against you. It's more than a betrayal. You feel trapped, a hostage in your own skin. You are a stranger to you. And boy, could I completely picture myself there when I went through all my heart stuff. Just like, who? Huh? You got the wrong person. Like, I'm going to get up on out of here and I'm going to walk out the door because this is not really happening. Just that whole sense of like denial and, you know, just why me, all of that.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah,
For sure.
I agree with that.
Okay. So Carolyn just left because she had a briefing with the White House that she needed to attend.
But Alysse is still here.
Alysse is
Because I
here.
don't have anything that important going on.
And we're holding down the fort. Okay. So you're welcome. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So the thing that I really love, the other thing that I don't want to forget to mention is how much I love the chapter Brigadoon, because toward the end, Selma starts talking about reading books and writing. She started writing. And I loved the way she described reading books, taking her away to another place, long line at the DMV. It didn't matter as long as you had a good book. And just the way she started to notice things. She noticed, you know, the blade of grass and how, you know, it smelled. She noticed dust bunnies. She noticed a lot of things she didn't notice before because of these amazing books she had read, like Catcher in the Rye and all of these, that she was able to read, you know, the words of these famous authors who were so good at being descriptive. And then she learned to be descriptive. And then she started writing. And I personally loved that. That was probably my favorite part.
I don't think it's accidental either that awakening for her came after all the medical scares.
Yeah.
Right? Because you and I both know firsthand, both having heart issues.
Yeah.
When you have medical issues that are life-threatening, and quite honestly, you should have died and you didn't, the way that you perceive life and how you spend your time and what you put value into, at least for me, changes a lot. And maybe part of that process is also getting older, right? And having more lived experience. Maybe that would have happened anyway if I hadn't have had, you know, some dramatic health issues. But I did. And I love that she has that appreciation for the written word. And I hope, you know, I think a lot about, my son is 25 and you have younger kids. Are they going to appreciate reading and books the way that we do?
Right.
I don't know. You know, I really don't know. And that makes me a little bit sad because I love the art of storytelling. And granted, it can come across in all different mediums now, whether it's video, audio, or the written page, but there's still something about holding a good book in your hand that does take you away and to another place. And what I liked about her style of writing, and not knowing her, I believe she probably wrote largely how she speaks. And I don't consider myself a writer, but when I do write, I try to write how I speak so that when people read it, they can hear my voice coming through.
Right.
And I think she did a really great job of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the medical diagnosis thing, I love what you said. Things get real clear real quick, you know, when you hear some of those words that are like, oh, I actually, this could be curtains for me. And it's a perspective shift like nothing else. And so when you realize, gosh, I'm this person, but I'm in this shell here, and this shell will not continue on, it's jarring, you know? I'm even thinking about Roger... Is it Roger Ebert? Siskel and Ebert. Anyways, whatever. One of the movie guys. And I'm not talking about those two grumpy Muppets. But he had throat cancer. And so trying to express himself and talk, I mean, that's a challenge. And just to think that I don't know, it's just a good reminder of spirit and body, and that they're two different things, and they're connected, but they're unconnected, and
Yeah.
it's just interesting to me.
I slightly off topic, but on topic with what you just said. In my late 20s, I got Bell's palsy.
Oh.
And, which for those of you that don't know, it attacks your central nervous system. It's not something that's contagious. It typically happens in older people, senior citizens. So me getting it at 28 was a very weird fluke. I didn't know what it was. But I looked like I had had a stroke. And one side of my face was completely fallen. I couldn't close an eye. I couldn't drink through a straw. I couldn't really talk very clearly. And it was about a month that my face was like that. And I was so devastated. And this is before I got sober, because I make a living with my face, not as a model, but as I'm a salesperson. I talk, like I have the gift of gab. And all of a sudden, my ability to communicate was removed. And that was one of the darkest periods of my life, because there wasn't a pill, there wasn't a treatment for it. It was going to run its course, and it was either going to go away or it was going to be permanent. There was no way to know. You just had to wait it through. And so when my face did return to normal, like I just never took it for granted again that I could smile or drink through a straw. And I don't know why it is that as humans, we have to have that kind of experience to value something. I wish we would just value it straight out of the gate. Maybe people do. I don't until I have a sense of that I've lost it or that I might lose it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, with Selma, like with MS, she lost so much control of her body and her abilities to move independently throughout her own home. That must have been really challenging. And I think it ebbs and flows, and it seems like she's probably better now, but I know that there's still, I still don't know a lot about MS, but it looks like it's a really big struggle to deal with.
And MS, like our cardiac stuff, those are those unseen illnesses or events that happen to people. And then, we're walking around through Safeway pushing a shopping cart, and nobody would ever know what you're struggling with physically.
Right.
Which is interesting and a bit challenging, and a good reminder also for me that every day I encounter people who are facing things that I know nothing about. So I never have a way to judge any of that or should judge any of that, or it's a struggle. It's a struggle, and that's just physically, not even emotionally or mentally. What was your favorite book, by the way, Alysse, that you've ever read in your entire life? Just a brief segue.
My favorite book of my entire life?
Of your entire
life?
Like put on the spot here, but not. So in other words, if you choose something now and later you're like, what was I talking about? It's really this. It's fine, because it's like this is just kind of a, what is your first
The Twilight
thought?
series? No, it's not it.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
not it.
totally.
That's not it. But I really read through
Jacob.
those all the way. Yeah, Team Jacob all the way.
All the way.
That is a really good question. Like, do I have a favorite book? There's a book by Lisa Smith, who I've actually become friends with. A Girl Walks Out of a Bar.
Oh.
And it is her memoir on getting sober. And it came out before the world was as inundated with recovery memoirs as we have now. Now there's lots and lots and lots of options.
Yeah.
But when I first got sober, there were not very many options. And the ones that were out there, I really struggled to identify with. And although I'm not in the legal profession, as Lisa was, the fact that she was a career gal that struggled with addiction and, was able to go and have this fancy job, but then also was dealing with these demons, that really, really resonated with me, and her candidness in how she told that story. And then getting to know her in real life after the fact has just been such a treat and such a joy. So I don't know if it's my favorite book of all time, but I love that one a lot, and I have fangirled her many times.
Oh, I love that. What a great story. I'll have to hear like how you met her and all that later. I want to hear the deets. I want to get the tea. So for some reason, when I was reading Mean Baby, and was reading that chapter, Brigadoon, when she was talking about the books, I kept thinking of my favorite book, which is A Gift from the Sea by Anne-Marie Lindbergh. And there's something about sometimes the way people paint a picture for you, where if that were, or I actually feel this way about any book that I've read and then seen a movie of later. It's almost like I don't want to see the movie because my mind and my imagination have already filled in the gaps of who I think that person was or what I think that scene looked like. And so for me, I don't want to ruin that.
Well, and so many times the movies are never as good as the books.
Totally. Yeah, and they leave out like these crucial parts that you're like, so where was that? Or
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just curious to know because I found that part of Mean Baby where she was talking about the reading and writing just so relatable to me. That was probably actually my favorite part. So, and I guess I'm wondering also, was there a particular chapter for you, or was it more of the overall, this is how this warmed my heart, or, this is how this topic, she covered a lot of ground.
No, I really found the whole thing pretty fascinating from start to finish. And it did jump around. But that was okay. And I just, and maybe because she's someone that I admired. I don't know that I ever fangirled her, but there's several movies that she's in that I liked. And of course I'm always going to be attracted to the glitz and the glam of fashion and Hollywood. So I liked that was interwoven through the story. I liked that she talked about being a mom. I have one son too, and she's had a lot of open and candid conversations with her son, and I feel like I've tried to do the best with mine, and that we've been through some pretty big struggles together. And yeah, I thought it was good. I'm still standing by my 8.5.
I love it.
Standing by it.
I love that you are. Okay. So as we start to wrap up, I wanted to share a quote that reminded me of my ADHD, because talking about this jumping around that she did, going back and forth, I was like, yeah, I didn't really have a problem with that either, now that I come to think of it. I mean, I get the confusion of it, like, where are we now? Oh, but okay, I'm going with it. She said, again, in that chapter that I liked, Brigadoon, liked so much, she said, I learned that Raymond Carver didn't write long stories because he didn't have the endurance. Oh, I thought, you can use your laziness to your advantage, and you can use your lack of focus and still create something beautiful.
And I think that's why I like this book, is it felt like a lot of little mini books within the book, because she does like consolidate things into little chapters, like this is about this and this is about this. And so I can see that coming out in her own writing. And for someone who, like me and like you, that have somewhat shorter attention spans.
Right. I don't know what you're talking about, though, actually.
I found it very easy to digest her story.
So, you know what? In closing, I'm gonna move the scale up a little bit for me. You're staying with your 8.5. I started out as a 5 with this book, but now that we've kind of relived some of these parts of it, I'm going to move my dial up to a 6.5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I did find valuable now that we've unpacked it a little bit. So, okay. So I have to say, Carolyn, love you lots. Thank you. Sorry that we took so long that you had to go and relay those important messages.
I think she would still be at a 5, though. I can't speak for her.
Yeah.
But she seemed like she was at a pretty solid 5.
Yeah, yeah. And would you recommend this book to everybody? Yes, I know Alysse would, because she recommended it to us.
Yes.
Bingo, zingo, zango.
But I think that means that going forward, we each have to take a turn at recommending a book for our
That's
new Boozeless Bookclub.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess you should pick the next one.
Yeah, all right. That works.
Yeah.
To wrap it up, though, I want to say I've been waiting since we decided we were doing this, I've been waiting that whole time to say this. Who here remembers Reading Rainbow?
My hand is up.
So, Matt, is your hand up? Do you remember Reading? Yeah, he does too. Okay. So,
can we put that song in right now?
I can be anything. And then you see the butterfly go by. Take a look. It's in a book. Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow. Got to do the echo? Okay.
Rainbow.
All right, good. So they'd always have this part where they'd have this kid get up there and he's read like, Mr. Pine's Purple House or something. And he'd be giving a review of Mr. Pine's Purple House or whatever the book was. And so LeVar would say before the kid would present the book, but you don't have to take my word for it. So you've heard what you've heard here today, but you don't have to take our word for it. So for your bailout bag today, people, you can read it yourself and glean whatever it is that you're going to glean for the book and have your own experience with Mean Baby. Be kind, rewind, and thank you for the honor of your time. And don't forget, take what you like and leave the rest behind. Lastly, this just in, breaking news. The Boozeless Book Club has decided upon our second book. So if you would like to get the book and read it and then be ready to hear us discuss it next time, here's the book that we're going to read. It is called Refocusing My Family, Coming Out, Being Cast Out, and Discovering the True Love of God. And this is by Amber Cantorna. Cantorna is her last name. And she is the daughter of one of the executives at Focus on the Family. So if you grew up in the 90s in the Christian church, like most of us in this very room did, then that might be of interest to you. Can't wait to talk about it.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.